Week 4, here we go. The Phil Steele Show, live and in color in the flesh. Again, author of college football's most comprehensive preview magazine. It is Phil Steele. Joins myself, Kyle Shasberger, Trip Hurd producing. Follow Phil on Twitter at PhilSteele042. I'm at Kyle Shas. Trip is at Trip Hurd. And for those checking in now on Twitter at CS Now Tweets, this is where you can find us at 1 o'clock every single Thursday. Learfield audio page on Facebook as well as the Varsity channel on YouTube. And if you're listening on podcast, thank you for subscribing as well. You know where to find us, the College Sports Now podcast feed. So, Phil, we're going to go over your top 3 plays, which you were perfect a week ago. You definitely made people some money. You gave people a leg up as they look to fund their children's college tuition for sure. So, some good vibes that we're playing off of this week. Our Sickos pick are 3-0 to this point of the year. So, a little Temple UMass action. Maybe we'll drop that at the end of the show. I know people are chomping on the bit to get in on the Minuteman and the Owls. So, Phil, you got to be feeling good. You gave the TKO to Herm Edwards. I don't know what coach you're going to erase this week with your picks, but week 4 certainly is going to be another fun one.
Yeah, and Eastern Michigan's big upset of Arizona State. It's too bad for Herm. When I was at ESPN, Herm and I would be in the green room at the same time, go over some NFL selections. So feel a little sorry. I consider him a friend that he's gone, but it was a nice play for Eastern Michigan last week.
And Trip, your surefire to fail teaser actually hit. So if people took your advice in any sort of way this past week for the first time ever, you're victorious. You got to be feeling high heading into week 4.
Of course. I told you guys, I'm never going to go 0-4.
I'm losing your audio, so fix your audio, and then I'll bring you back into the show. How about that? Phil, let's get to some games, though, this week. And we're going to start we got 3 games on Thursday. We're going to put Chattanooga and Illinois aside, but because we're doing this, we're going to hit all of them that we can, 5 of the 6, outside of Chattanooga, the Mocs, and the Fighting Illini. So we'll go in order, and we've got the Black Diamond Trophy that is up for grabs on Thursday night in Blacksburg at Lane Stadium. West Virginia is giving 2.5. They are a road favorite in Blacksburg, which is a little bit curious. 50.5 is the total. ESPN 7:30 kick, 54th meeting between these two. They've only met 2 times since 2005. We know Virginia Tech is mighty good on Thursday nights, especially in Blacksburg, where they're 13-5, 23-10 all time on Thursday. And you wonder, is Neil Brown? Is that heat possibly getting turned up a little bit on him? But certainly a great entry point to week 4 with these two getting together.
We've got a couple games this week, which are basically offense versus defense. West Virginia clearly has the offensive edge here. JT Daniels hitting 64% with a 6-2 ratio. They've got the better run game. I mean, both Donaldson and Mathis have topped 200 yards rushing on the season. Virginia Tech doesn't have a running back that's topped 175 yards. So edge offensively to West Virginia, but edge defensively clearly to Virginia Tech, holding opponents to 139 yards per game below their season average. I got to be honest with you, Kyle. I'm a sucker for Enter Sandman and Virginia Tech on a weeknight, so I'm going to take the home underdog here with Virginia Tech to pull the upset.
Home underdog just seems like the natural, kind of obvious pick, especially considering Virginia Tech's strengths, their success on Thursday, but too the whole underdog aspect of it. When West Virginia has, let's face it, they scored all 10 times that they had the football a week ago, but again, that was against a way lesser FCS-type opponent. Both these teams are coming off of FCS wins, but Virginia Tech at 2-1 and West Virginia at 1-2. Neil Brown, again, in a curious spot, but we'll see how things progress here tonight. That's 7:30 on ESPN. I would stay away from that one. Coastal Carolina and Georgia State is another one that I think can go either way. And as your 9 sets of power ratings say in your magazine for Georgia State, this is as unpredictable as a team as there could be coming into the season. And Phil, if you want to share your screen at any time, if you want to test the waters with that, feel free. We can start with Coastal or Georgia State, but you pick here from this moment on for the duration of the show, or if you want to give a little preview, peek behind the curtain of Phil Steele Plus, you just let us know. But Coastal and Georgia State, the Panthers might be the best 0-3 team in the country. I know the schedule has been tough, but losing to Charlotte, that's one certainly that is going to be hard to stomach moving forward for the Panthers. Coastal is a 2.5-point favorite on the road. The total at 62.5, 7:30 game on ESPN2. The home team is yet to cover in 5 previous meetings.
Yeah, and you get a 3-0 team against an 0-3 team. But as you mentioned, Georgia State, you go back to the South Carolina game, they gave up 2 block punts for touchdowns. Basically, the yards were even against an SEC team on the road. North Carolina, a game that came down to the wire. And really the key last week for Charlotte was getting Chris Reynolds back. Remember when he was against FAU in the opener, that game was 10-7. Reynolds went out with injury. So did Charlotte's offense. Charlotte got blown out the second half, blown out the next 2 weeks. But down with Reynolds back, they pulled the upset last week. So keep your eyes on Charlotte now that Chris Reynolds is back. They may pull a few surprises as they go along. But Coastal hasn't been overly impressive. You go back to that Gardner-Webb game 2 weeks ago. They're actually outgained by an FCS opponent by 141 yards. Last week, sort of struggled with Buffalo, didn't get the cover. And in the opener against Army, they did have a 30-11 first down edge. This game, I think, is going to be a high-scoring game. You look at Charlotte last week putting up 41 points. I think with Grayson McCall, Coastal will be able to put up points here. I like the over is probably my best play here, and I'm a little torn on the side. Georgia State's tougher than their 0-3 record, but it's tough to go against Coastal. They just find a way to win every week.
Coastal, one of 3 group of 5 teams still undefeated. Tulane and James Madison being the others. We'll talk about the Green Wave and the Dukes coming up a little bit later on. Georgia State won this game without Grayson McCall at quarterback for Coastal a year ago, 42-40, so it was a track meet. Phil is leaning that way again here tonight. And can Sean Elliott's team turn the corner and get that first win and deal the Chanticleers their first defeat of the season? Syracuse and Virginia. This game is on Friday. Again, Illinois-Chattanooga, your other Thursday night game. This will be a 7 o'clock start on ESPN. Syracuse is a 9.5-point favorite at home. 53.5 is the total. Their offensive coordinator, Robert Anae, came from Virginia, so this is essentially kind of what we saw offensively for Virginia a year ago. And man, was Garrett Schrader the beneficiary a week ago. Tripp, if you want to cue that up, this is how things ended in what was, I think, the game of the day, Purdue and Syracuse 1 week ago. All right, no audio, so we'll come back to that. Garrett Schrader, though, let me tell you, it was riveting on the Syracuse Sports Network. Schrader orchestrating what was the game-winning touchdown drive at the end of that one, Phil. You had to have been on the edge of your seat, peering out at your 12 televisions, and certainly locked into Syracuse and Purdue. Schrader, 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's got the same numbers as Caleb Williams at USC.
Yeah, and what a difference it has been with Anae taking over the offense. And they have a running back in Sean Tucker. I don't think Tucker had a great game last week, seemed to run a little tentative, but if he gets back to the form he showed against Louisville, then that Syracuse offense is potent. And I'm going to look at Virginia and go back to that Illinois game. You know, Illinois in the first half, I believe, turned the ball over 4 times, and yet Illinois still led 21-3 at the half. In fact, Virginia had just 4 first downs entering the fourth quarter, got most of the yards late in the game in that. They were a team that's struggling with 5 new offensive linemen, and Brennan Armstrong has struggled behind that offensive line. He's only got 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Remember last year he had 31 touchdowns, just 10 interceptions. So I think Syracuse, the better team at home. Crowd noise is going to help you against a young, inexperienced offensive line as well. I look for Syracuse to keep it rolling and get win number 4. And they better get their wins right now, because if you look at the end of the schedule for Syracuse, NC State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Pitt, Florida State, Wake Forest, Boston College, they've got a tough ending slate. So they need a good 5-0 start to make sure they get to a bowl game this year.
This Syracuse offense, one of 5 nationally to be averaging at least 500 yards per game. And you're right, it's a backloaded schedule, Phil. 8 of 9 Syracuse had lost entering this year at home, but it's been a different team here, thanks largely in part to Anae as the offensive coordinator. And it's shown for Brennan Armstrong. 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, only has been sacked 8 times without his former OC at Virginia. So that's one of 3 games on Friday. How about Nevada and Air Force? The Falcons, 23.5-point favorites, 45.5 is the total. Fox Sports 1, 8 o'clock is the start for this game. Air Force won this one last year, 41-39 in overtime, but coming off a difficult defeat, 17-14 at Wyoming.
Yeah, and some teams are good against the option, and some teams aren't. And Wyoming is a team. Craig Bowl knows how to defend that option inside and out. They did it again last week held Air Force to 272 yards. I don't think Nevada's quite in that same realm. As you mentioned, last year Air Force put up a lot of points, 41 points in the game, a lot of yards. And Nevada's defense is a shell of what it was last year. Their offense is a shell of what it was last year. I think they're one of the more fortunate 2-2 teams. They open up with 2 wins because of +9 in turnovers. Turnovers have gone away. They lost to an FCS school, and last week, I mean, you had to stay up till the end of that doggone Iowa game. It ended like 1:30 in the morning after all those weather delays. It seemed it was even one where they came back for one play and then left. But I think Air Force, off a loss at home, will be able to get the option rolling. Nevada's offense has struggled all season, averaging 290 yards per game. In fact, they're averaging 131 yards per game below what their opponents allow on the year. Add it all up, I like Air Force to win this one comfortably.
Boise State giving 15.5, 45.5 total at UTEP. CBS Sports Network, 9 o'clock on Friday. Third game on Friday night. Phil, what's your lean on this one? Boise State is a team that has dominated this series. The Miners are 0-6, losing by 30 points per game. A little nugget I got out of the magazine. Again, the Phil Steele College Football Preview. Still time. It's only week 4. Phil Steele Plus, philsteele.com. Inside the press box, log online to philsteele.com to see how you can be more like him. Bet smarter, not harder. Phil, what's your take? Again, the UTEP struggles going to continue here against Boise State on Friday night?
You know, I think UTEP's better than their 1-3 record. I know their only win's been over New Mexico State. Their loss against New Mexico last week, they not only turned the ball over 7 times, they got stopped on downs 3 times. You go back to that North Texas game at the start of the year, the yards were even. In fact, they had a slight yardage edge, had a couple of key plays go wrong. I think we're going to see a better UTEP down the stretch. Boise is a team that plays better on the road than they do at home, as you mentioned. And we could take a quick look here at the stats, which shows you how quickly it comes out. Try to get this thing. I hit share. It should be coming up. Well, anyway, UTEP, as you mentioned, has lost the last 6. So add it all up. I'm going to stay away from this one. I think it's accurately priced.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to read. 15.5, Boise State, the favorite, heading to UTEP. And yeah, the expectations were very high entering this year, but it hasn't gone that well for the Miners and Dana Dimmel to this point. So let's get to the main course, the marquee games of the weekend. And we're going to start in our own backyard, Phil, and that's Winston-Salem. I saw a Clemson football bus is already here in Winston-Salem. It's out in front of the Marriott. I don't know who took the bus down a day early. Normally these teams are traveling on Friday. Clemson is not that far. It's only a couple of hours, but the people are showing up in purple and orange in full force already on a Thursday in Winston-Salem. Truist Field will be packed out. They're doing a blackout for the measly 30,000 people that they're able to cram into that place. But it'll be charged up. But Wake Forest has not fared well against Tigers at all. 13 straight losses. It's been closer, Phil, over the last couple of years. And there's your screen. It's been closer the last couple of years, not the 63-3 type game that we've had, 3-4 years ago, but still Wake Forest has been unable to solve the riddle that is Clemson, and only 46 rushing yards per game over those last 3 losses against Clemson. That doesn't bode well, Phil, for a team that only had 21 on the ground against Liberty in a 1-point win.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, Kyle. And if you take a look here, we've got this last 25 years matchups on every single matchup on Phil Steele Plus. You just click on the opponent, comes up. You can see Clemson has absolutely dominated this series. In fact, the last time Wake Forest was even within 14 points was back in 2011. All these other wins have been by 14 or more. There's what Kyle was talking about with the rushing edge. You can see right here, 36, 37, 64, all red numbers. They cannot run the ball well. And I think matchup-wise, when we take a look at this game, it is something that really favors Clemson in this one, in the fact that Wake Forest runs that slow mesh option. And the slow mesh option is a brilliant move by Clausen. It has held opponents at bay, and it's gotten Wake Forest to score a lot of points. But if you watch last year's game and watch the last couple of years in this matchup, Clemson's defensive line just blows that thing up. And I expect that here. They can rush 4, they can rush 5, they can blow it up, they can take the mesh out of the equation, force Wake Forest to pass the ball, and play better there. And you go back to last year. If you look at last year's games, Clemson was very poor on offense the entire year. Their best game on offense came against Wake Forest, 48 points, 542 yards. I look for them to light it up here. I think Clemson's a better team, and the matchup I love here. Clemson matches up extremely well with Wake, and while Clemson beat Wake Forest last year, Clemson's playing with a chip on their shoulder because Wake Forest was actually the division champ. Clemson was not. So they're actually trying to dethrone Wake Forest here. I like Clemson minus the points.
Certainly an interesting additional layer there. I think people forget about it. It was Wake, not Clemson, in the ACC title game representing the Atlantic Division a year ago. And Clemson with NC State on deck, a home game where they look to extend their streak to what would be 37 consecutive wins, but NC State beat Clemson at home a year ago. So that game's on tap for the Tigers. First up, it's Wake Forest. Okay, Florida and Tennessee. This is where College game day is. I don't know how you make the decision to go there, you cowards, and not Lawrence, Kansas, for Duke and Kansas. We'll talk more about the Blue Devils and Jayhawks coming up. Again, stick around for Phil's top 3 plays. Also, Tripp, this game, 5 consecutive years to close out the 90s, was a top 10 showdown. This weekend, it's Florida's the 20th ranked team in the country taking on 11th ranked Tennessee, 3:30 on CBS. By the way, Clemson favored as a touchdown at Wake. But Florida and Tennessee, Trip.
Yeah, and we've got a 10.5-point spread in this thing, which seems kind of big to me. Now look, Florida, Anthony Richardson, out of all the quarterbacks in the SEC, he's dead last in passing yards, passing completion, and 0 passing touchdowns. I'm sure you guys have probably seen that stat too. But Tennessee's really only been tested against Pitt, and I'm kind of curious to see what Phil thinks about that Florida defense compared to Pitt's defense. Can they keep this game under that 62.5-point line?
Yeah, I think they can. And, let me show you a couple of things about this particular game that I really like. There, oh, not here. Hold on one sec. We should be able to get there. All right. So in this game, when you take a look at it, the first thing I want to point out is the series history. If you're a Tennessee fan, look at all this red. When you look down here, red means you lost the game straight up. Florida is 15-1 over the last 16 games straight up. And if you take a look at when Tennessee has actually been favored in this game, which is not very often, but when Tennessee is favored in the game, they've been favored the last 6 times they've been favored. They have lost 5 of them outright. So it's a series that just says Florida, Florida, Florida. And the key is going to be Anthony Richardson. Richardson had 2 key turnovers against Kentucky, 2 interceptions, which really turned that game around. They were winning by 9 when he threw the first one, and then the second one cemented it. USF last week, once again, 2 interceptions, the key, keeping USF in the game. If Anthony Richardson could play like he did against Utah, then they've got a chance. And the other thing I want to point out in this game, let's see, we had another thought there. The thought's gone away. But anyway, I like Florida plus the points in this one. I think as long as Anthony Richardson plays well. Oh, here's the other thing. Has Tennessee ever been a double-digit favorite against Florida? Take a look at this. We give you the stats all the way back to 1976. So if you're wondering, has Tennessee ever been a double digit? You could look at it. I looked at it earlier today. You could go all the way back to 1976, and there's not a single time since 1976 Tennessee's been a double-digit favorite against Florida. So add it all up. I like the Gators plus the points here.
Wow, yeah, that was the double-digit line for Tennessee, number one. That was a head-scratcher. But the fact, too, that it's never happened, that's not all that surprising. But, yeah, that's Phil Steele Plus is giving you access to all of that information, not just the player stats and the start charts and the stats week to week, things that are updated on Sundays after these games are played, but results going back 45 years, year-by-year stats over the last 33 years, leaders in the stat categories for 2 decades, draft history going back all the way to 1936. Again, be more like Phil Steele. Phil Steele Plus, $99 value. Go to philsteele.com. And one lucky viewer, listener, subscriber at season's end, we're going to dish out a free subscription of Phil Steele Plus valued at $99. All right, moving on to the Southwest Classic, Jerry's World. 11th time this game's going to be played. Arkansas and Texas A&M being played in Arlington at AT&T Stadium. The Hogs, 2-point underdog to Texas A&M. The Aggies are the favorite here. 48.5 is the total, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Arkansas's win a year ago by 10, 20-10, ended a lengthy slide against the Aggies, but it also gave them their first 4-0 start since 2003. Phil, Hogs, Aggies, where are you leaning here?
Slightest leans at Texas A&M. They have won 9 of the last 10 of this matchup, but the thing I like about A&M is probably the defense. Their defense holding opponents to 186 yards per game, below their season average. Meanwhile, Arkansas's defense actually allowing foes 28 yards above their season average. Haven't been impressed with A&M's offense, not in the least bit, not in any of their 3 games. Have been impressed with Arkansas. They can run the football with Raheem Sanders averaging 6.7 yards per carry. KJ Jefferson hitting 71% completions. But I think overall, when you look at the talent of these 2 teams, A&M's got a little bit more talent, and they're in this neutral site game. So I'm going to slightest lean to Texas A&M, but I sure hope their offense gets going before they get to the meat of the schedule.
You think the offense looks better, though, more at least educated, more able, more capable under Max Johnson this past weekend? Were you surprised at all by that move?
Not surprised because of how they played with Haynes King the first 2 games. I understand what Coach Fisher was doing, but King just didn't get it done. I think you're going to see Max Johnson improve on a weekly basis.
That game was hard to watch last weekend still, nonetheless. Miami and Texas A&M, 2 inept offenses to this point. Makes me wonder, too, about Mario Cristobal's ability to actually put together a game plan versus just recruiting. But that's a question for another day and for another show, quite frankly. We'll move on to Baylor and Iowa State. This one is being played in Ames, which has been a house of horrors of sorts for the Baylor Bears, 3-6 in 9 games since the start of the Big 12 in Ames, taking on Iowa State. And Matt Campbell, I feel like, Phil, was in a more familiar position where he's not like this hefty favorite every time out. Now, he is the favorite this week by 2 points and the hook. Iowa State is. ESPN2, 12 o'clock is where you can find it. The Bears, though, come in as the 17th ranked team in the country. There's no number next to Iowa State's name, and I think that's a position that allows for Matt Campbell to flex him and the Cyclones and play up to their potential.
Nice job, Kyle. That's perfect. It's something I was going to say, and I think you hit it right on the head. And this whole season has been different for Iowa State. You know, Matt Campbell has always built this team on the underdog basis. And last year, they came in ranked in the top 10 in the preseason. And what was the one game that I think turned the course for both teams last year? It was this one. And Iowa State went into Baylor last year, and they actually had a 27-15 first down edge, 479 to 292 yard edge, but Baylor somehow won that game. Baylor season turned course, and Iowa State season turned course as well, as both went different directions. Now Iowa State, I think, feels like the underdog here. As you mentioned, Baylor's ranked. They're not. Baylor's defending Big 12 champ. They're not. They're coming off a mediocre season. They're at home. They've done well. They dominated the game last year. And while a lot of the talk was, hey, Brock Purdy's gone, I think Hunter Decker's going to have a better year than Brock Purdy had last year. He's already hitting 74% with an 8-3 ratio. They've got the defenses are close. It'll be a lower scoring game, but I like Iowa State at home in this one to win it by more than a field goal.
9:30 Pac-12 Network is the game I'm most interested in on Saturday among all of them. 7th-ranked USC coming to Corvallis and Reser Stadium as 6-point favorites. 71 is the total. These are 2 high-flying offenses. Yes, I'm talking about the Beavers of Oregon State. When you look at these 2 teams more closely, it's the number 7 scoring offense in USC at 50.7 against the 13th ranked scoring offense at 45.7 in Oregon State, who beat USC in Los Angeles for the first time in 60-plus years a year ago. But the Trojans have won 4 of 5. We know what USC is with Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison offensively. Still question marks defensively, but the first true test against the Beavers in this offense coming up on Saturday night. Phil, this is one that certainly has got to have you excited.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, last year's game, 45-27, that one had 72 points last year, and USC's offense was nowhere near what it is this year. I could poke some holes in USC's 3-0 start. I mean, the Rice game, they got 3 interception returns for touchdowns. The Stanford game, Stanford got to the 4 and the 2-yard line, got intercepted in the end zone and fumbled, or else perhaps that's a ball game. They only lost by 13. And last week, Jake Hayner goes out in the second quarter, the first play of the third quarter for Fresno State, and that's why Fresno State only totaled 17, also leaning towards over if you're looking at this matchup. Oregon State, the one thing I want you to do if you watch this game, and you've never watched an Oregon State team close, this crowd's going to be amazing. I love it when they get the chainsaw rolling when it's third down, and they're going to have a fierce crowd. They can run the football with Fenwick and Martinez. Chance Nolan is a very solid quarterback. Their game turned last year when Nolan took over. So I think it's going to be a great game. I got to lean with USC minus the points because they're laying less than a touchdown. But I do think it'll be a high-scoring game.
And Jonathan Smith has certainly worked wonders for this Oregon State program. It's his alma mater, but you wonder, there's going to be some chatter. There's going to be some buzz about some bigger jobs. Certainly Arizona State would be a great fit, but you're staying within the conference. You're above that. I feel like if you're doing what you're doing at Oregon State and you're Jonathan Smith, you should be a guy that might be in contention for a school like Nebraska. It remains to be seen.
And I tell you, Kyle, when I talked to Jonathan Smith the first time going over the team with him, I sent him my team pages which have every player on the roster. We got to the two deep of Oregon State at that point, and there were question marks all over the place. They might have had 5-6 guys in the two deep that could play, in the second string. Now they go three deep, and partially a little into the fourth. He's done a great job recruiting and a great job developing the players as well.
Oregon State and USC, that's my game of the day for sure. I'm going to include that on my top plays after Phil gives us his top three here before we get out of here today ahead of week 4. So Notre Dame and North Carolina is where we're going to head to next in Chapel Hill. Third straight year that these two teams are meeting. Carolina coming off of a bye, all familiar spot for Notre Dame opponents, it seems like. 7 lead changes in this one a year ago. Notre Dame won 44-31, I think it was, back in South Bend. So the question here is going to be defense for North Carolina. Okay, are they going to enable what has been a elementary Notre Dame offense? It's been non-existent. Now, Drew Pine got more comfortable in the second half as Notre Dame was able to find a way against Cal, but it was the Notre Dame defense that really rose to the occasion against a pesky Golden Bears squad. So can that Notre Dame defense contain Drake May in any sort of way? He's got 11 touchdown passes to lead the country, nearly 1,000 yards passing. And will North Carolina be able to somehow bandage those wounds defensively? It seems ripe for a North Carolina side here. Phil, what are you seeing in Chapel Hill?
Yeah, this is one I'm going to stay away from. It's another one of those, what I talked about at the start was the offense versus defense game. If you like offense, North Carolina's been unstoppable. Drake May, as you touched on, 74% with 11-1 ratio. And that was the one main question mark North Carolina had coming into the season was the quarterback, because it appeared their defense was better. It appeared that they were better equipped at running back and wide receiver. But that has not been the question this year. But Notre Dame's got by far the better defense. I mean, they took on the best offense in the country in Ohio State and held them to 256 yards per game below their season average. They held Marshall to 216 yards below their season average. So their defense has been dominant and taken on potent offenses before. I like the fact that Notre Dame's won the last couple games in this series, does well against ACC teams. So I've got a slight lean to Notre Dame, but I'm not looking at play in this game because I think it's a true toss-up.
I gave you the North Carolina defensive numbers a couple of weeks back. Still sitting near the bottom. No surprise. They are allowing 468 yards per game. That's 123rd nationally, Phil, and giving up 6.3 yards per play. So an opportunity for if Notre Dame can't find any offense in this game, I mean, they're just broken. Write them off. They're not going bowling at all. So they should be able to at least find some points, but can they contain Drake May? Yeah, certainly a number of different ways this one can go. ABC 3:30 is the start for the Fighting Irish and the Tar Heels. Okay, Tripp, I know we're dealing with audio issues, but I got to give you the floor for your seminal moment, my man.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State picked up a big win last week at Louisville. I think I'm going to go with the try to buy the win strategy again, because I don't really like the spot they're in this week either. With all the injuries, I'm not sure I can trust Florida State to cover that big of a number against anyone. I think with Tate Rodemaker coming in at quarterback, I thought he looked pretty good. He looks like a capable quarterback. I want to say, I mean, some people might think this is crazy, but Florida State's ceiling might be a little higher with Tate Rodemaker. The floor is definitely lower with Rodemaker. They're going to turn the ball over more because he pushes it down the field more. I don't know. I just don't like the spot here for Florida State. And with Jared Verse, we don't really know what's up with him. I think Jordan Travis is going to come back, but it's not going to be in this game. I can't trust my guys to cover 16.5 against BC.
Interesting. Yeah, and I would probably lean the same way that you are, Tripp. I mean, I think when the backup quarterback comes in the game, they play differently than when they're actually the starter. And I think we might see a different Tate Maker this week. I like him as a QB, but I don't know if he's going to lead as many touchdown drives as he did last week. They do have the running back in Trayshawn Ward, but Boston College, a team, their main question mark is the offensive line. If they can keep Phil Dracovic up and healthy and protected, they've got the receiving core that can put some points on the board. So I would probably lean a little bit with Boston College plus the points. But this is probably another game I'm going to stay away from.
It's one of those, this BC team, it's like a completely rebuilt makeshift offensive line, right?
Yes.
Like they only have like one healthy guy that's able to play, whether it's guys going off to the NFL or injuries or otherwise. So it has not been the start, certainly, that BC had envisioned to begin the year. Phil, that was a hell of a game Thursday night, too, with Florida State and Louisville. I was very impressed with Johnny Wilson. I mean, that was, I looked up his numbers as an Arizona State transfer, 12 catches, 154 yards at ASU, period, in his career. And then Thursday night against Louisville, he's balling out, 7 grabs, 149 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That guy is 6'7".
That's a big boy at receiver and a good target to throw to, especially in the red zone. That's where you see your 6'7" receivers do the best work.
FSU has won the last 5 home meetings against BC, 3-2 against the spread, 10 and 11, 10 out of 11 that they have won overall against the Eagles. So FSU and BC, then it's an 8 o'clock start Saturday on ACC Network. Again, Florida State given 16.5, 17, 48.5 is the total. All right, final, let's go to some of these more under-the-radar type games before we get out of here. And we mentioned, we talked about Syracuse, and we talked about College Game Day going to Tennessee and Florida versus going to Lawrence, Kansas, and how blasphemous that was. But Syracuse, Duke, Kansas, UCLA, Kentucky, who am I missing? There's 7 basketball blue bloods that are all 3-0. Kansas, Syracuse, UCLA, Duke, UNC, and Kentucky. There it is. 7 of them. 2 of them are meeting in Lawrence, Kentucky. Seemed like a prime location for College Game Day. Who was last there, I think, in 08, back when Kansas had rose, 07, rose all the way up to number 2 in the polls. So the Jayhawks, Phil, are conjuring up this magic of 15 years ago. And Lance Leopold, another guy that can maybe be in the discussion for a job like Nebraska. I mean, he's a true program builder, and this is one of the top offenses in the country. But a big number, it started around 9. It's come down to 7.5. Kansas, a touchdown favorite? That's never happened before, right?
Yeah, touchdown favorite against a Power 5 team. And once again, all you have to do is click right here, look on your last 45 years results. And I did this earlier, save you a little time scrolling all the way through the screen. But 2009, they were actually a 23.5-point favorite against Duke and ended up winning the game. They're also a 19-point favorite against Iowa State and only won that game by 5 that year in 2009. As you could see, back in 2009, they were coming off a 12-1, 8-5. And they actually went 5-7 that season, so they're probably a little overpriced under Mark Mangino. Now, here's the other thing to look at with this game. If you look to go back to last year, click on the individual player stats, you could see that Jalen Daniels took over as a starting quarterback against Texas. He played against TCU and West Virginia. What was their record in that game? How about 3-0 against the spread? And, of course, if you click on this year's individual player stats, you can see that Jalen Daniels has started all 3 games for Kansas again. 3-0 against the spread. This guy is 6-0 against the spread as a starter. That's a great record. But Duke also does extremely well when they play non-conference teams. They know they need to make their hay prior to getting to conference play, and they have an incredible record. I believe the record is 22-4 in non-conference play, and already this year covered against Temple, covered against Northwestern, pulled the outright upset there, and even covered last week against North Carolina A&T. With a late score to get the cover in that one. So I think if you take a look at these teams defensively, Duke is holding opponents to 38 yards below their season average. Kansas is allowing opponents 42 yards per game above their season average. I like what Riley Leonard is doing at quarterback. He's got a 5-2 ratio. Coleman and Waters both running the ball well along with Leonard. I think that Kansas wins the game, but I like Duke plus the points in this one. So I'm going to take Duke plus the points. And I am really looking forward to this battle of 3-0 teams.
Yeah, I am too. I'm all over it for the same reasons, Phil. Just like when Duke went to Northwestern earlier this year, I thought that was an absolute lock, and sure enough, it was. They covered the 9.5. It might have grew to 10 at one point, and they won outright. So I love the Blue Devils in this spot. Also, Kansas, last time they started 3-0 was that 2009 game, and they beat Duke in Lawrence to get there. That was the only previous meeting in Lawrence between those two. All right, so after Duke and Kansas, I want to turn our attention to the Iron Skillet, TCU and SMU. It should be the Iron Skillet of Sonny Dykes, of some sort, the Sonny Dykes Bowl. We should rename it. Anyways, Dykes, who was the head coach for SMU a year ago, is offensive coordinator for the Mustangs. Rhett Lashley takes over as the head coach. Dykes is at TCU, so much familiarity between these two. And SMU is a 2-point underdog at home. The total was 70.5. ESPNU, 12 o'clock is the start for this one. Horned Frogs have created a lot of havoc defensively, and I think they can cause fits, nightmares for Tanner Mordecai. That game, I picked the over for SMU in Maryland a week ago. Just missed. I'm not even going to touch this one. Again, another big number. Close to 70, right around 70. But I like TCU in this spot, Phil, just because of Sonny Dykes, the familiarity there, and two, how well TCU has played on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I like TCU. You look at the fact that they're in a great situation. They're coming off a bye. Meanwhile, SMU just played that big late-night game against Maryland last week, had to fly back home. Now they're playing TCU. Sonny Dykes knows the personnel of SMU intimately, knows every single player. They've recruited almost every single one of them. Now, SMU players should be fired up for this game because of the fact their coach left to go to TCU. They might want to show that they're a team that not worth leaving. They're better than that. But I like TCU defensively. They have the edge there. And I think also when you look at TCU, I like the fact that Sonny Dykes has the knowledge of the SMU players. So I like TCU off a bye to win this one on the road.
James Madison and Appalachian State. What a 3-week ride. It's been a dream for the Mountaineers. Yet they've only gone 2-1. Remember, they lost the game against North Carolina 63-61. They go to College Station, upset the 6th-ranked team in the country. Students are jumping into duck ponds, just ravaging their way through Boone on the mountain, just having the time of their lives, the most memorable time they'll probably ever have. Quite frankly, I'm pretty jealous. I wish I can go in a time machine and be young again and be there to partake in everything that's been going on in Boone. And then College Game Day is there. Luke Combs is the guest picker. And you got kids camping out for 24 hours in anticipation of game day. You're in a hole against Troy. Thanks, Troy. There went one of my locks as App did not cover the 12.5. But the game ends on a miraculous 53-yard Hail Mary. They call it the Miracle on the Mountain Part 2. Our boss, Adam Whidden, had a phenomenal call that's gone viral all across the college football circles. He said on the Coaches Show, Mountaineer Talk, the other day with Sean Clark, if App wins over JMU this weekend, Adam will jump in Duck Pond, and the head coach is going to follow. So more viral moments to come if App can take care of business this weekend against JMU. First meeting as FBS opponents. JMU, of course, in their first season, but these are old FCS playoff rivals. JMU is 7-point underdog, 58.5. The total, ESPN Plus at 330, Phil.
I think we're going to see Adam jump in the pond then, because when you take a look at App State, as I pointed out last week, I thought they were in a horrible situation. They had come off the big North Carolina game, College Station, stayed late night, had fly home in the morning, victory parade, game day on hand. That's a lot of distractions. Guess what? They're in a normal week this week. Monday was normal. Tuesday was normal. Wednesday was normal. I think you're going to see App State play at its best. Chase Bryce has done well at quarterback. He's got a 9-1 ratio this year. Peoples has looked great at running back. And while the defense gave up a lot to North Carolina, I think they're a better defensive team than you would expect. In fact, they're holding opponents to 80 yards per game below their season average this year. Now, JMU was absolutely dominant in the opener. Middle Tennessee wasn't even a game at the half. They had a 301 to 24-yard edge. I had to stand up and go, whoa, watch out James Madison. But this is their first trip to the Sun Belt. They haven't been to App State. This current team has not been to App State or the Sun Belt. So I think back in a normal environment, App State is the better team. JMU is a team that lost a lot to graduation. And I like App State minus the 7 in this one.
Coming off one of 2 buys is JMU because of that transition from FCS to FBS, only playing an 11-game schedule to this year. All right, where to next? Let's go to Tulane and Southern Miss. This is in New Orleans. The Green Wave 3-0 for the first time since 1998, getting their first win on the road at a P5 opponent since 2010 when they had knocked off Rutgers. So party like it's 1998, Phil, and the battle for the bell will be renewed. These two teams playing a little more frequently. You had the bowl game a couple of years ago. I think it was the Armed Forces Bowl. They played in the regular season in Hattiesburg last year. So they've renewed this rivalry. Southern Miss has the edge 23-9. Tulane has won each of those last two most recent meetings. But this is all about the return of Southern Miss head coach Will Hall, the former offensive coordinator for Tulane, coming back to New Orleans where he coordinated under head coach Willie Fritz.
Yeah, and I actually like Southern Miss plus the points. I know Tulane's a great home favorite. In fact, twice on the Phil Steele Plus Tour, which I put up every Friday on the YouTube channel, I used Tulane as a home favorite against UMass and against Alcorn State, but that's not who they're taking on here. They're taking on a very underrated Southern Miss. Now, you had to be impressed with Tulane last week. Going to Kansas State, coming out with the win. I thought Michael Pratt looked great in that game. The defense was the dominant part, winning that game 17-10. But if you look at Southern Miss a little closer, I thought they outplayed Liberty in the opener, and Liberty's much better than people think they are. And then you go to the Miami of Florida game. They led that thing 7-3. Miami scores a touchdown late in the half. I thought Zach Wilkie in his first start looked good. Well, they got Ty Keys back last week as well. So they've got both Keys and Wilkie at the quarterback spot. They got Frank Gore, the guy that was the Wildcat quarterback against Liberty and guided the win there. So I love their loaded backfield. Defensively, they're playing well, holding opponents to 11 yards below their season average. And so to me, Southern Miss is very underrated. I like the fact that Hall's coming back to Tulane, knows that place very well. I like Southern Miss plus the 13.5 here.
Yeah, I actually had two teams cost me a little bit of money last weekend, and Tulane was one of them. The problem with Tulane, I just didn't take the bait. I thought the line was a little bit on the low side with 14 against Kansas State. I've heard so much good things about K-State this year, so I was expecting the line to be a little higher. I thought it was fishy. I still just didn't jump in there. Those guys, along with Houston, also cost me a lot of money. That just neither one of those worked out for us. But moving on,
I think Houston cost us all money.
Were we all on Houston last week?
I can't remember.
Yeah. All right. Well, what about number 1 Georgia? They're taking on Kent State. What do you like in this game, Phil? I mean, it's a lot of points, but Kent State, they kept it close with Oklahoma for a while. What do you think they can do this week with the Bulldogs?
Yeah, and the amazing thing about Kent State is that all their games against bigger teams come right along the line. You go back to the Oklahoma game, the line was around 30. The Washington game, the line was around 23. And even going back to last year, they're playing Texas A&M. The line was around 30. They lost by 31. Iowa, the line was around 24, and they lost by 23. So all the big games tend to come right along the line. But here's the stat. I don't have anything to show you on Phil Steele Plus for this, but how about Kirby Smart is 4-8 against the spread when favored by 40-plus points? And this year, Georgia took on one team as a huge favorite like that. It was Samford. They got up 30-0 at the half. They had a 329 to 59-yard edge. Final score, 33-0. They didn't put it on in the second half. And I think Kent State's got enough talent, and they've been tested. Washington, Oklahoma, Georgia. In fact, I kidded Coach Lewis. Last year they played Texas A&M, Iowa, and Maryland in the non-conference slate. And I asked him, I said, what'd you do? Walk into the AD's office and say, I want a tougher schedule. A&M, Iowa, Maryland, that's not going to cut it. Give me something better. And they give them Washington, Oklahoma, and Georgia this year. I would lean with Kent State plus the points just because Kirby Smart does great as an away favorite, does great in a lot of situations. The part he doesn't is as a large home favorite.
And Kirby Smart had 2 tackles in the game where these two last played. The only other time back in 1998. Champ Bailey had a 40-yard touchdown reception on the third play of that game. Georgia went on to win 56-3. This year, though, outscoring opponents in the first half, 82-3 and 130-10 overall. Andy Staples of The Athletic had a good write-up about that meat-grinding schedule, as he described it as, for Kent State. Phil, Washington, Oklahoma, and then Georgia, 3 out of the first 4 games. I mean, this is a scheduling philosophy that's been in place for Kent that hopefully they're looking to get away from, but still you're able to cash in almost $6 million. I think it was 5.8 off those 3 games. So you're certainly helping to fund the entire athletic department and maybe more. That line, though, is a little bit bigger than what Alabama has as a 40.5-point favorite at home against Vanderbilt. SEC Network, 7:30. Crimson Tide come in as the second-rated team in the country. Vanderbilt 0-3 against the spread in the last three. Last two, they've been shut out against Alabama alone. Bama has won the last two by combined 93-0. Can Bama cover what is 40 and a hook against Vandy?
Yeah, I don't really have an interest in this game whatsoever. You look at Vanderbilt last week, they were down 28-14 against Northern Illinois, and Northern Illinois lost their quarterback during the game. Vandy rallied and got the win 38-28. Now they're on the road again. I was surprised. I thought they were going to go with Wright as the quarterback last week, but they went with A.J. Swan once again. Swan appears now to be the quarterback of the future, much like Mike Wright was last year. So I think Vandy will try hard. They're on the road. They cover more games on the road than they do at home. And Bama's not a tremendous home favorite. They do better as an away favorite, much like Georgia. So no real interest in this game. I could see Bama easily winning it by 42, but I could see Vandy hanging with them as well.
Yeah, I think the under, if
Hanging with the
anything.
spread, I should say.
Yeah, I think the under would be the only thing worth maybe entertaining at 58.5, but it would be Bama, again, another shutout, like 56-0, just squeaking in under that. One more, Phil, before we get to your top three plays. We've got a sicko pick, and Tripp can give us his teaser if he's able to. Tripp, we need to throw your computer out the window here today, okay? Like, make sure we buy you a new computer before next week. But Navy at ECU, the Pirates are 17-point favorites at home against Navy. 50 is the total. ESPN Plus, if you care to tune in on Saturday, 6 o'clock is the start. Navy has won 5 of 6, averaging 45 points per game against the Pirates. Midshipmen and the Pirates, Phil, this is, I think it was Chris Vanini at The Athletic who properly put this one, the battle for the Black Pearl. Little Pirates of the Caribbean action here.
Wow. And, let's take a look a little bit at East Carolina against Navy. If you click on the opponent, it gives you the last 25 years matchups. And you mentioned those rushing stats for Navy, and Navy has done well. But if you look at their overall numbers, this was prior to East Carolina's head coach Houston taking over. They gave up 563, 436, 593. And even when Houston took over, he had a small defensive line he didn't like. He got the defensive line better. They got 468, 318, 382. So you could see the improvement. East Carolina has played better against the option since Houston took over. And this is by far the best defense that Houston has put on the field. And if you look over here, you can see a lot of green numbers for East Carolina. They've got a potent run game with Keaton Mitchell and Harris. Holt Nailers has got a nice 7-2 ratio this year. They've got explosive receivers. And I thought Navy was in a real good situation against Memphis here. Memphis was coming off of playing the air raid offense, had to play the option. Navy was at home, off a loss. And they always play Memphis great at home. I thought it was a tremendous situation. Guess what? They couldn't keep up with Memphis's offense. 506 yards they gave up. I think East Carolina is going to be able to do the same this year. As I mentioned, their defense playing better. They worked on the option during the month of August to get ready for this thing. I like East Carolina minus the 16.5 in this one. I can't hear anything.
I muted myself. Apologize. So EMU 30-21 win to cover the 20.5 last week at Arizona State. One of your 3 wins. Perfect week for Phil, as well as Iowa minus 23.5. They won 27-0. What were their 3 weather delays against Nevada that came in at 3 o'clock Eastern time, and then NC State minus 9.5, 27-14 winner at Texas Tech. So what would be the 3 plays for you this week to make us a little bit of money, just as you had last week, Phil?
Yeah, and last week I went off the board, picked a couple of games that weren't on the show after I had said that I was only going to pick games that were on the show. I'm going to take one game that wasn't on the show today, but 2 of the teams that we've talked about earlier today, I'm going to take Southern Miss plus the 13.5 against Tulane. I think they're a much better team than people think, and I like them to get the cover and potentially the upset here, especially with Tulane off a big win on the road against Kansas State. I like App State back in a normal week at home. I'm going to take App State minus the 7 over James Madison. So, Adam, have fun swimming this week. And then the third game I'm going to take a look at, and I just want to line up this one because we can show it on Phil Steele Plus, and it's going to be Michigan against Minnesota. And Michigan is, or not Minnesota, Michigan's playing Maryland. Let me line this one up over here. Michigan's a 17-point favorite. Once again, if we take a look at how this game has gone, you can see that Michigan has not only won the last 6 games, they've won by huge amounts: 59-18, 38-7, 42-21, 35-10, 59-3, 28-0. And then you look at how Maryland has done against ranked teams. When they play the big boys, Maryland comes up short. At Ohio State, they lose 66-17. They lost to Minnesota by 18. Penn State beat them by 17. Michigan beat them by 41. And yes, I have Michigan included in the big boy category. And this year, Penn State wasn't very good. They had a losing record, so you can't count that one. But then you come back over here, taking on Ohio State. They lose 73-14, 38-7, 52-10. I wasn't overly impressed with Maryland last week. They actually were out first down 30-16, outgained 520 to 439. So I like Michigan minus 17. So my 3 top plays for this week: Southern Miss plus the points, Michigan minus the points, and App State minus the points.
I love it. And what you're looking at, if you're watching live at CS Now Tweets, Learfield Audio on Facebook, Varsity Channel on YouTube, is Phil Steele Plus. $99 value. Go to philsteele.com. We'll have a free subscription to give away at year's end. Too, you can learn all about Inside the Press Box, which is more of an advanced feature to give you even more data. Phil's picks each and every week, write-ups on all FBS teams, all FCS teams, NFL teams as well. Inside the Press Box, we'll give you final score predictions for every single game. So even more, go to philsteele.com. Follow Phil on Twitter at philsteele042. So you got Phil's top 3 plays. Mine will be Oregon State USC over the 71. I just think those 2 top 15 offenses, there will be fireworks at Reser Stadium in Corvallis under the lights. My favorite game of the weekend, Duke, 7.5-point underdog at Kansas, just out of principle. That's the Blue Devil in me. They seem to cover those. Plus, they're playing with so much confidence under Mike Elko, and the same can be said for Lance Leopold and Kansas. Just a tremendous college basketball game being played on the gridiron on Saturday. Then ECU, to back up what you said about the Pirates, Phil, I certainly like them covering the 16.5, 17 if you can still get it. It's come down just a little bit at home against Navy. Trip. Do you want to interject with your poor audio quality? Give me your teaser quickly, and I'm going to mute myself so my feedback isn't being heard.
We can try. All right, Florida and Tennessee. I think this game's going under. I've got it teased up to 68. It's a 6-point teaser. All right, Boston College at Florida State. I like Boston College. We've got them teased up to 23.5. Southern Miss, I'm riding with Phil on that one. I've got them teased up to 18.5. And another game I like is Cincinnati taking on Indiana. I've got Cincinnati minus 10.5. Indiana coming off that big overtime win over Western Kentucky. I'm sure you guys were listening to it on the College Football Blitz. So there you go. 4 teams, $10 bet wins 30, $100 bet wins 300, and you could do the math from there.
There it is. Tripp's Sicko, his teaser pick. As for our Sicko, that teaser hit, by the way, so take note, folks. 3-0 we are on the year. Vandy plus 1.5, 38-28 win at Northern Illinois a week ago. Iowa and Nevada, the under team total for the Wolfpack hit at under 3.5 was a shutout, 27-0. So even through those 3 weather delays. For this week, this was part of Ryan McGee of ESPN, his bottom 10. Each of these 2 teams are in there. Phil, do you know where I'm going? UMass at Temple. How about these 2 darlings? Plus 9.5 for the Minutemen. Give me UMass all day, baby. They had a backdoor cover a year ago, or the last time that these 2 had met. If you're Don Brown, this is a game that you are just licking your chops over, right? Like, this is you going into a pro NFL stadium, playing at Temple. Like, all momentum is on your side here. You're UMass. You're gonna cover the 9.5. 43.5 is the total. But give me the Minutemen here. UMass picks up their 2nd win of the year.
It makes a lot of sense. And Gino Campiotti, their quarterback, more of a runner than a thrower. In fact, they're hitting just 49% this year, but he's the team's leading rusher. And with the Don Brown blitzing defense against the Temple offense, it's only putting up 268 yards per game. UMass is actually holding their opponents to 21 yards per game, below their season average. It makes a lot of sense when you're getting that many points.
For Trip, I'm Chaz. He's Phil Steele. Follow him on Twitter at PhilSteele042. Again, his top 3 plays: Southern Miss minus 12.5 at Tulane, App State minus 7 against JMU, and Michigan at home minus 17 against Maryland. Phil Steele Show live every Thursday, 1 o'clock, right here at CS Now Tweets on Twitter, the Learfield audio page on Facebook, Varsity channel on YouTube. Subscribe, get those alerts, interact with us as well. You'll be in the running for a free subscription of Phil Steele Plus, valued at $99. Go online to philsteele.com. Phil has shown some of those images of how beneficial and how instrumental of a tool Phil Steele Plus can be for you each and every week. Bet smarter, not harder. Again, listen to Phil with Wayne Cook and Stephen Hartzell as well. Slide back one more episode if you're on the podcast feed, College Sports Now. You can find Roddy Jones, Michael Felder throughout the week as well. And as Tripp alluded to, the College Football Blitz, 12 hours of Red Zone radio drop-ins all across the country. Hometown announcers in college football, 12 hours of action, Sirius XM beginning at 12 o'clock and on the Varsity Network. Get the app, varsitynetwork.com, or the Varsity Network app. Download it today. Phil, it's been a lot of fun. We'll talk ahead of Week 5 next week, okay?
Sounds great. Good luck to you gentlemen this weekend.
Oh, the Bears. Bounce back. Lovely week. Let's go. Back at home. By the way, those officials were terrible. But the Bears, we're going to get right. All right, Phil, we'll talk next week. See ya.
All right, take care, guys.
Bye.